300,000 years, modern humans have met challenges with ingenuity and creativity.
Every living person today is a testament to their survivals.
But how did it happen?
What were their lives like?
Join us as we explore the world that existed before us.
Kids!
Hello and welcome back to a slightly different episode of Before Us Kids.
What?
Oh, wait. Before you guys out there all get too concerned.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it, dude.
Yes, I know. Don't worry. Colton and I are actually recording a bunch of really fun new episodes this week. They're going to be done really soon. But a lot of you kiddos out there have also asked us if there's a way to just listen to the stories.
Well, yeah, because they're awesome.
I agree. They're so awesome and fun. And we hear you.
Go on.
So we decided to put together an episode that only features the stories from Science Tales for Curious Minds. It's gonna be a supercharged story-splosion. A science tale tsunami. Or as I like to call it, Volume 1. But in my unending quest to also educate...
You're going to teach us something again?
I'm always teaching you something, even when you don't realize it. In fact, did you know that the stories in each episode aren't just made up? They're called Science Tales for Curious Minds for a reason. And that's because the details in the stories are all drawn from real, published scientific findings.
You're joking.
Actually, I'm not joking. I read loads of very boring scientific papers to write each one of the stories. And then I translate those papers and those findings into the exciting, fun, and sometimes goofy stories that you all love.
What do you have to translate them?
Oh, good question. What I mean is that scientists are actually natural storytellers. Think about it. We collect data. We understand what the data tells us about our world, and then we write up our findings into papers. Now, the problem is that those papers are all written in a very special way, often using very specialized language. But they're stories nonetheless. So what I do is I draw on my own background as a scientist. I take the information from those papers, and then I translate it into a way that kids and non-specialists all over the world can all appreciate. But the science is still there. So after each of the stories today, I'm going to provide a few short notes about the actual scientific studies and findings that inspired them. And if you're ever interested in learning more about the science behind the stories, then be sure to check out our very own series with that exact name that's exclusively on our Patreon. But anyway, it's story time. It was chilly, and the shoulder-length brown hair of the girl fluttered on the stiff breeze. She was laying on her stomach on top of a small rocky ridge, watching the herd grazing in the valley below her. The girl had been raised to respect these magnificent creatures. The survival of her and her family depended on them. Their skins kept them warm, their meat kept them fed, their tusks were made into tools and jewelry, and their bones were used to create shelters that protected her family during storms. The wind was whistling across the plain now. Winter was coming. Soon these plains would be blanketed in ice and snow. The mammoth sensed this too. The matriarch made a loud call with her trunk, and the herd responded. They were on the move. The matriarch was the largest, strongest, and most senior female in the group. She was easy to spot. Her shaggy hair was a grayish-brown, and her curved tusks were longer than all the others. The other members of the herd had large tusks too, but their hair was brown or reddish-brown, and the rambunctious calves born earlier that summer darted in and out of the shaggy curtains of hair under the adults, playfully weaving around their feet of the larger mammoths as the herd slowly started moving away. The girl's father had taught her to stay downwind to prevent the herd from detecting her. By now, she was used to their overpowering stink. It was pungent and tangy, with a hint of damp earth and a touch of mushroom. She liked to tease her brother that he smelled the same way. He liked to joke in return that it was all part of his strategy to get closer to the animals. She liked it when they joked around. Her brother was now old enough to join the other adults on their hunts. One day, she would join them too. For now, she remained with the rest of the group at their camp, collecting nuts, berries, and learning how to make stone tools from her mother's sister. The girl reached up and touched a small pendant on a thin string that was tied around her neck. The pendant was made out of an animal tooth. It was already very old and polished, shiny and smooth. Her friend who lived with his family and their group in the next valley over had given it to her. She adored his gift, and in return she had given him a piece of mammoth ivory, and she had carved into the head of a lion. Well, it was supposed to be a fearsome lion, but she was still practicing her carving. One day she hoped to be an excellent artist like her grandfather. He was old and had trouble walking, but he carved all of the group's hunting tools. Deers, horses, bisons. The figures he carved on the tools were so lifelike. He told her that the carvings helped bring the animals to the hunters, and that helped their group to survive. The mammoth herd was still walking. Soon they would dip below the horizon. Her group would follow them, of course. They always followed the herds, moving around these lands as the moon grew bigger and smaller in the night sky, as summer turned to winter and back to summer. It was a well-worn cycle, and everyone was always so excited to move to the next location. What would they find? One time, she watched a pair of lionesses hunting. They crept low to the ground, muscles coiled, eyes locked on an injured horse, as they circled with deadly precision, the air thick with anticipation. Another time, she remembered collecting water when a woolly rhinoceros lumbered through the thick riverbank mud. The rhino's hair was light brown. It was young, and like all rhinos, the girl knew it couldn't see her, but it could hear her and smell her. It was exhilarating seeing the rhino, but scary, and she left behind the plants she was collecting as she slowly, cautiously crept away. Life was hard, but it was exciting, and for this girl, it was also the only life she knew. And she had a loving family who took care of her too. And she had friends in nearby groups, and she had these amazing animals to watch.
Okay, so in this story, a young girl watches a herd of woolly mammoths who are migrating. Now, migrating means to move from place to place depending on the seasons, temperature, and food availability. Many animals migrate today, and some animals migrate great distances too. Woolly mammoths were no exception. In fact, a study from a woolly mammoth tusk that was found in Alaska showed that one particular fleet-footed mammoth who lived 17,000 years ago actually traveled 70,000 kilometers during its lifetime. Now, to put that into perspective, it's the same as walking around the Earth twice. Whoa, that's a lot of walking. And before we move on to the next story, yes, it's also true that we now know that woolly mammoths also had a variety of hair colors. About 20 years ago now, researchers started to question if the color of preserved woolly mammoth hair that was found frozen in places like Siberia was real or not, or if it had been artificially bleached over time. So the researchers did some studies and found that a specific gene called MC1R controlled the color of woolly mammoth hair. And it led to the classic dark brown shaggy coats, but also it showed that mammoth hair could have come in shades of auburn and even blonde. That's right, folks, a ginger mammoth and a blonde mammoth. I wonder, though, if the blonde mammoth had frosted highlights. Get it? Frosted highlights? Because Ice Age? No? Oh. Anyway, let's get on with the next story.
The boy was running fast. His lungs burned, his muscles ached.
he never realized that hunting for food was such hard work. It was his first time on a hunt. He'd always dreamed about the day that he'd be able to accompany the other hunters in his group. In his dreams, he single-handedly wrestled to the ground one of the mighty deer that roamed these open woodlands. Easy, he thought. He would be regarded a hero, a living legend among his family. His father, uncles, and brothers had been tracking for 2 days. Food was scarce. The paw prints of a hare were days old by the time that they found them. Someone else thought that they had spied an ibex on a distant hill, but it was too far away. Everyone in their group carried a small pouch containing nuts and seeds, food that they could eat on the go. Occasionally, they would also pass by other foods to snack on, like insects, rodents, or fruit. Every member of the small hunting party also clutched a long spear. Some were sharpened on one end, but most fine to a deadly point on both ends. His father had told him it was to always ensure a backup in case one point broke. The boy had always been fascinated by the spears. Each one had been shaved, scraped, and polished using stone tools to strip off the bark and knots and to straighten them so that they were smooth and easy to handle. The hunters also took great care to carve the front of the spear just a little thicker, making it slightly heavier and more stable to wield. Many of the spears had also been passed through fire, charring their exterior while making the wood harder and stronger. The tangled limbs of the yew tree was his group's preferred source for wood to make the spears, and a great ancient yew grew in a shady grove near their cave. When he was younger, the boy loved climbing around those craggy, twisted branches. Today, though, 2 of his uncles carried spears made from wood that was unfamiliar to the boy. They called it spruce, and it came from high in the hills far away from their camp. It was exotic and exciting, and the spruce wood smelled nice to the boy, too. But the hunters were more interested in the dense and straight grain of the slow-growing spruce wood to notice anything else. The day before the hunt, his youngest uncle had teased him to be careful so that he and the other hunters might not mistake his red hair for a shaggy mammoth. The boy laughed with his family. It was a pretty good joke, he thought, and he appreciated the attention. He was nervous and excited. That excitement quickly turned to boredom as the hunters trekked ever further for food. His attention was beginning to wander. Was that an eagle flying overhead? Down! Everyone fell to the ground. Did someone see something? That was the grunt of an auroch. He was certain of it. A great beast. The experienced hunters began to carefully fan out, each clutching their spears with 2 hands held across their chest, anticipating anything, ready to use their spear at a moment's notice. Their spears weren't for throwing, though. They were thrusted forward, and that meant that the group had to be coordinated in their attack. Otherwise, someone would get hurt. Broken bones were common among the hunters, and sometimes they even lost the ability to move an arm or leg due to their injuries. The boy lifted his head nervously, trembling. He looked over the damp earth. Not far ahead, he could see the great, big black auroch. Its great forward-pointing horns and the pale stripe along its spine, unmistakable. In that same instant, it looked up too. There was a split second where the auroch and the boy's eyes locked. The boy knew instinctively that the auroch was processing what animal had red hair. Is it harmless or harmful? The auroch let out a terrifying grunt. Obviously, he had settled on harmful. The boy dropped his spear and ran. He ran as fast as his legs could carry him. In the corners of his vision, he saw pandemonium as the hunting party scattered like ants. After some time, the boy stopped running, out of breath and sweaty. He found his father and most of the rest of the hunting group. Everyone was okay, but now he understood why they were always injured. Hunting was harder than it seemed, but there was no time to rest. The group now knew an auroch was in the area. The hunt was on. Oh, so much action in this story about a Neanderthal boy and his group out on a hunt. So when we look at the food remains of Neanderthals or other early humans that were left behind at archaeological sites, it's easy to forget that those people had to go out every day and search for that food. They couldn't just go to the grocery store like we do today. Plus, hunting was an activity that was really risky. For one thing, animals move around, so you cannot guarantee when or if you will find an animal to even hunt. And once you do find an animal to hunt, then the animal isn't just going to let you book it with a stick. In the case of Neanderthals, when paleoanthropologists study their bones, they see that those individuals have many, many injuries. Many of them were healed, but still lots of injuries. And it means that those people had really active, but also really hard lives. And they were hurt a lot during their lifetimes. It was a really, really tough life. Oh, and if anyone is curious too, if Neanderthals really did have double-sided spears, yes, there's a really cool site in Germany called Schöningen, where 10 spears were discovered in waterlogged sediment. And the spears were about 300,000 years old. All but one of them was made from spruce, which is a kind of pine tree. And all but one was also double-pointed. I guess it's like that age-old Neanderthal saying,
"A two-sided spear makes hunting twice as smart."
Actually, I just kind of made that up. I have no idea if a Neanderthal actually said that, but it sounded really good, right? Okay, so on to the last story of the episode.
The little girl walked over to her big sister, looking for her most special, most prized possession. It was a small doll that their mother had made for her out of twigs. Her mother had split the twigs in half, soaked them in water, and bent them around to form arms, legs, and a cute little head, which were then bound with long blades of dried grass to keep everything in place. The little girl, who was not more than 3 years old, adored this doll and took it everywhere, including to the edge of the lake earlier that day. The lake was not far away, less than 20 minutes to the north across the flat, sandy ground. This time of year, though, there was lots of mud and puddles from rain that made the trip a little bit more challenging. Earlier that day, the little girl, her big sister, and other friends and family members had all gone down to the lake. There, they spent several hours collecting water, plants for food, as well as washing themselves. It had been a very pleasant day. The sound of lions in the distance, however, cut short their playtime. Lions were common in the area. So were big and scary wolves, saber-toothed cats, enormous lumbering sloths, camels, the stocky mastodons who kept close to trees and shrubs, and roaming herds of towering mammoths, hulking creatures easily twice the height of her father. But now, in the middle of the night, the little girl had only just realized that she left her doll next to a bush where her family had been sitting. Now granted, she had spent a lot of time making a very nice play campsite for the little doll. But now, at nighttime, she thought the doll must be so frightened to be out there, all alone. And the little girl was frightened too without her doll. She looked at her big sister now, pleading with teary eyes to help her get her doll back. Standing up with a big sigh, she picked up the little girl and positioned her on her left hip. The night was still and clear. Soft silvery moonlight illuminated puddles of water, the gentle rolling sands, and the bushes that dotted them. The sisters both knew exactly where to go, but now they stood at the edge of their camp, apprehensive. Was it safe to go? Night times were scary, and even their short trek to the lake could be dangerous. The little girl whimpered, and that was enough for her big sister to know how much this meant to the little girl, and to her if she wanted to get any sleep that night. So she repositioned the child on her hip and set off quickly, walking with determination and purpose. She took the most direct route possible, maneuvering only around larger puddles and patches of mud that caused her bare feet to slip. The darkness pressed in, thick and alive with unseen things. Their eyes flitted from shadow to shadow, tracing shapes that might be nothing, or something that was watching them back. On the cool night breeze, they could hear the grunts of elephants and other creatures out there, somewhere. The ground sloth walked cautiously through the night, sweeping its short and stocky neck from side to side, scanning the area for predators. It had a slow and peculiar gait, almost like waddling, because the rear feet turned inward. The front feet had 3 long claws, which were also curved inward, creating the sloth's distinctive crescent-shaped tracks in the ground. Its long, shaggy fur fluttering in the breeze, the sloth slowly walked over the path of the children. It stopped immediately. It sniffed excitedly. Danger. It could smell a predator. With a grunt, the sloth heaved itself on its massive hind legs, awkwardly twisting its bulk around like a dancer without grace, scanning the area with clumsy, jerking movements. But there was nothing there. No danger. The sloth lowered itself back to the ground and continued walking westward across the flat. About halfway on their journey, the little girl started to fidget. She needed to pee. Of course she did. They were racing across the valley on a rescue mission for her doll in the middle of the night, and there could be any number of big, scary animals with sharp, pointy teeth stalking them right now. Of course, this is the perfect time and place to pee. The girl gently sat her little sister on the ground next to her. At the very least, it also gave her a chance to catch her breath. The short break over, the little girl climbed back into her big sister's arms, and they headed off again. A few minutes later, a hulking shadow lumbered out of the darkness. It was a large, lone Colombian mammoth bull. The bull sauntered across the girl's tracks. He could smell the children and knew they were nearby, but he was unconcerned and grabbed another clump of grass and sedge with his trunk and popped it into his mouth, lazily chewing as he lumbered off nonchalantly. The girls, meanwhile, had reached the edge of the lake. Immediately, the little girl squirmed out of her big sister's arms and raced to the bush where her doll was seeking refuge. There, among the scrub, the little girl found her favorite doll, safe and sound. Now they had to make the journey back to camp. They could sense the other creatures around them as much as they could hear them. There were mammoths nearby, and neither one of them wanted to startle one for fear of being trampled. The little girl crawled back into her sister's arms, cradling her doll and nuzzling her head into her big sister's shoulder, drifting off to sleep happily. The older girl set off on the same route as before, albeit a little tired and slower this time. She could see that many animals had already crossed their path. Alert, she continued back to camp, thinking to herself that tomorrow she was going to have an amazing adventure to tell everyone. This is actually one of my favorite stories. It's also one of the coolest archaeological discoveries. Of course, the story takes place along the edge of Paleo Lake Otero in the Tularosa Basin that is now part of White Sands National Park in New Mexico, which is in the United States. We talk about these sites in the episode itself, so let's look a little bit more closely at some of the key details. First, let's talk about that little girl's doll. Did they actually have dolls and toys during the Paleolithic? Almost certainly. But finding and recognizing that evidence can be really, really tricky. For example, there are sites in the Czech Republic, which is in Europe, where 30,000-year-old little clay figurines literally have kids' fingerprints all over them. No, I mean seriously, like the fingerprints are embedded in the clay, and they can tell that kids were making these things. Kind of like how kids make little figures out of Play-Doh today. Other kinds of toys, like dolls, also probably existed, but they may not be preserved.
One such possible exception, though, comes from the Grand Canyon in the United States, where researchers have found split twig figurines. And these little figurines were tucked into protective little cracks in the cliffs. The Grand Canyon figurines are about 4,000 years old, and they were made by splitting the branches of willow trees and then folding them around to create animals. In the case of the figurines from the Grand Canyon, though, they're believed to have been used for religious purposes. But the fact remains that if they were making little twig animals for religious purposes, why not make it for other purposes too, like toys? Well, this has been fun. And we're going to put together Volume 2 with more stories and fun facts. And if you ever have any questions, comments, or interested in participating in a future episode of Before Us Kids, then please send us a message. We'd love to hear from you. In the meantime, keep an eye out for those new episodes, and we will be back next week with more amazing content from Before Us Kids. All right, cheers, folks. Before Us Kids is written, hosted, and produced by Eric Fisher. Audio design by Eric Fisher, and Ian Lawrence composed the theme song.